Hi all and welcome back to An Evening with Thomas, and our guest tonight is Marilee Nietain, and we should be in for a rather interesting show. At some portion of tonight's show there will be an Intel piece update. I can't wait till Thursday, but the important thing is about Marilee and the show, and I'd like to say hi and welcome to Marilee.
Hello Thomas, I'm glad to be here.
So we've kind of been threatening this show for a few weeks, and we finally got it on, and I'm looking forward to it, and I'm sure the listeners are as well. And before we get into the meat of the show, perhaps you can give a little bit of your background about yourself and personal and your academic before we go on to professional and spiritual stuff and all that.
Okay, I'd be glad to. Those that are aware of a little bit of my story knows how deep and in-depth this can go, but we'll just start with the surface and let it just blow us where it goes. So,
yep.
And of course I'm not really used to being the topic of discussion, so we'll just kind of take it from there. Personally, I'll just kind of basically go through. I was born near the Yellowstone caldera this time around, up in Wyoming. And from there, I had quite a bit of run-ins right off the bat with how I came in to this incarnation. I came in with full memory, but I had to go through the developmental stages of the human bioform. So it was kind of an unfolding process at first, and just some basic bullet points there. I was involved in some of the early 60s MK Ultra kind of things, and then grew up pretty much down in the middle part of Wyoming, and we can go into more detail,
Yep.
Into that as you feel fit with that. But I pretty much.
How was life early on at home with family and friends, and how when you were a young child, how did life grow for you then, even with your knowledge?
Well, it was almost immediately detected on many levels that I had come in with quite a bit of information. And day 3 was my first brush with death, and it wasn't just NDE. I was suffocated and revived, and then I was handed off to my paternal grandparents at that point. And my grandmother was, she was employed with the U.S. government, and was very involved in the political stuff. Now, my grandfather was more of the underground type of person and had a lot of connections in some of the more shady areas. So right there was the first split of what I was introduced to. School-wise, going through grade school and stuff, never did have trouble with my grades or anything, but being an only child raised by 2 generations ahead of me, and actually 3 generations, because my great-grandmother was there as well. And school was kind of a breeze with that. Interacting with my peers was a little bit more of a struggle because I never really did identify with being a child, I guess.
Yeah, I get that. It's kind of difficult. You go into school expecting to be taught, and yet none of it, particularly some people just get on with it and go through the motions, and some people go, this is not quite right. Why am I learning this rubbish? And, did you feel like you were kind of on the outside looking in on aspects, or did you manage to integrate with your peers as such?
Well, it was always easy, I guess, making friends. I was always very open with people, but then even back then there was always this duality kind of thing that it was either instant like or instant hate from other people. So I always have this, what I've come to know now as a shadow mirror.
Yeah.
When people tend to project things, it either is received well and we work on that, or it's an immediate attack and defense kind of thing. So learned how to buffer that some. As for the school stuff, I learned rather quickly on how to maneuver through that, how to keep my grades going. And when I came in, one of the things that I came in with is what I was told by my great-grandmother as the cauldron of the Sheila, or the core wisdom repositories. I was told at a very young age that many people, well, I don't know, many is relative, I guess, but there was several people that had come in at a certain time with direct access to these repositories.
Yeah.
And I didn't go through school or even college and university to the point of learning anything. What I came in to do was to confirm how advanced this virus that I had been involved in had taken over with information and history. So what I was on the search for was to validate and find out just how corrupted all of that had gotten, and it wasn't the regular learning process. I was looking for validation of what I brought in and just to see where the mess laid when I got here.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, we always, we've covered this in recent shows about looking for external validation of things we already know. And it's kind of a strange anomaly we have, where we're always seeking external when we have many of the answers contained within, if not all of the answers. And it's just about unlocking them in a ways, stepping outside of not the boxes that they create, because they're enough, but more so the boxes that we create. And that's one of the examples of it, where we can step out of our own boxes. If we step outside of our own boxes, their boxes don't matter.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's an important point. And so you kind of went through school and drifted through, unlike me. My time at school wasn't much fun for people, least of all me. Although I did have a laugh, but it was an ongoing daily battle. It just didn't resonate with me. So you went on to, unlike me, because I saw it as an extension of more school, college and university and academia. And with what fields did that lead you into?
Pardon me, I didn't catch all of that. I had a little bit of a breakup on the phone here.
I said, unlike me, I said I never went to, although I did 1 year in college, but I got bored of it. You went on to academia and college and university, if I'm not mistaken. What sorts of fields did that lead you into, and does it play into relevance of what you do now?
Yeah, that was a path that was a very complicated road in itself. I ended up getting my GED because I went through a very, very rough period of trying to break away from the control and the handler situation of what I was being groomed for during that time, and finally got out of there. I do have memoirs with more details on this, but I don't really like getting into the details because that kind of takes away from the whole overall message, you know. But by the time I started college, I had started out as a computer science major, and I was thinking on the good old terms of, you know, trying to make a living. I was trying to fit into society at that point. There was many times during this that I tried to veer away from what I knew I was here to accomplish and try to get along just to get along. And at that point, that's why I chose that major. And I've always had huge problems with EMF fluctuations. I'm one of those that hear the stories about walking down the street and the street lights go off. I went through 4 television sets one year just like that. Yes. So, you know, I've had that long history and a lot of other health anomalies and everything, this whole gambit, this whole trip through here. But I worked all semester on a flow chart on a program and went to enter my final exam lesson to send to Laramie, the university, and I knocked out the whole university server. That career.
Oops, as you say.
Even now, you know, IT guys, when they set up my computer stations and things like that, they just have a heck of a time, because if I'm anywhere in between, if it's running on Wi-Fi, and I'm anywhere in between the station and the printers per se, they all get scrambled. Stuff goes to all sorts of different departments. So it's just been, so anyway, that one wasn't there. And then I started going through a huge breakdown period when I started, my grandfather, who was my main handler during that time, had died, and the deep-seated programming that had been instilled in me, you know, that if the truth, that's the usual one, if the truth is to come out, you know, he was to kill me, but he was no longer around, so this program took over. And I ended up several stints in psychiatric wards, a couple of commitments to the state mental hospital. And this was all during the time that I was doing 3 majors and 2 minors, you know, because that was how rapidly I was trying to confirm the information and how messed up it had gotten since the last time I was here in this realm and plane.
Yeah.
And I actually earned my degrees in psychology, social science, and social work. My minors were in comparative religion and cultural anthropology. So, but I did earn those inside, most of the time inside the hospitals.
Wow.
Couple of semesters I was locked up in the schizophrenia wards because they didn't know exactly what kind of a diagnosis to label me with, and that was one of the highest security ones to keep me in. And I would do my studies and research in the library there at the state hospital. I would write my research papers and fax them over to my professors at the university. Wow. So that's, and I kind of laugh about it now as that being my field research days, you know, because I was in there as a patient learning much more than I ever did as a clinician.
Yeah. This is has been, for the benefits of the listeners, this has been an ongoing issue about souls coming in here, soul spirits coming in here with different abilities, not special, just different abilities on a different vibratory frequency. We speak about this in the main shows. And they have machines or ways of detecting those that come in that can have an influence that can stop the dark forces. And so the people that do come in then become targets. And the easiest thing is declare them psychotic, or they can't do that, they'll put them on some sort of bogus sexual charge. You name it, anything that they can do to disrupt And if people think it starts when you become an adult, think again. You need to listen long and hard. This starts in the womb. And the interference, and they do everything in their power to disrupt a normal, what you would class as normal, or there is no such thing as normal life. And you are targeted by all the hooks that we talk about in the show, the 5 hooks. And you can't do that. They'll throw in others. And it's a battle within a battle within a battle within a battle. And then you have, as Marilee mentioned, then what they were doing is disrupting the flow of souls coming in and diverting them into military families. This is what's been happening in the past. So then the military take over the control of them, and they end up in these programs, the MK Ultra and all kinds of other heinous things which we've described. Some of the tactics they use to break that person down to then operate on their behalf. And it's important that people understand that this is no fun. And people are, the paranoid and all that. That's the easy way out. Look at the information, because this has been going on a far larger scale than you can imagine. And,
yes, I would have to agree with that, Tommy, 100%.
The fact that you still had enough about you to then go, well, I'm in a poor position here. I've got little or no help. I'm going to fight. I can either buckle under in the facility that I shouldn't be in, or I can fight back in my own way. And you choose to fight back. And that's how you get the people with inner drive, is anyone can overcome any situation, provided you believe in yourself and you have the drive within yourself to go, you know what? F you, you're not keeping me in here. I'm going to use the system against you. And that's essentially what you did. You went and studied it. So then when they're coming with their clever words and their book stuff, you can go, actually, that's not this. So kudos to you for doing that, because, like I said, I know it's not easy being targeted. There's different layers of targeting. And it appears your layer is one of the top-end ones. But this is a massive, massive problem that's been going on.
Yeah, and I think, kind of looking at it retrospectively, I knew then, because I had a drive that came from elsewhere than just this realm and plane.
Yeah.
So what I thoroughly think that I knew what was in store with this, and that was where I extracted a lot of the subversive stuff that, actually experiencing these mind control programming and everything. I remember over and over as a young child hearing their frustration. We can't break her. We can't break her.
Yeah.
But even now I kind of look back on that and I'm going, it was rough going through that, but, basically what they accomplished was to create their own nemesis.
Yeah.
Because that, I have incorporated that into my vocation. I don't like to say career, per se, because I'm the type of person that I have to have my all put into what I do as a livelihood.
Yeah.
It's not just a punch-a-clock job,
Yeah.
And that's where I've been in the mental health field, but I've also done a dual kind of professional path as a spiritual counselor in many roles as that. And they were way separate for a while, and I've tried a number of times to merge that with varying levels of success, But I guess the best thing to say is that I learned firsthand how to undo that. And even in my so-called jobs in many recovery centers, mental hospitals, private practice, counseling centers, that kind of thing. Even behind that, I always worked as well behind the scenes with some of the, safe houses, that kind of thing for people in coming out of cults. I did a lot of cult exit counseling, people coming out of these programs very heavily, family violence issues, that kind of thing. So that stuff's in the background as well. And I think I ended up with a very well-rounded approach with, this psyche virus that I align it with Wetiko. We can get into some of more of those things down the line in this conversation as we go into that. But that was some of the experiential levels that led me to where I'm at right now. And I don't regret one bit of it. I've been clinically signed off as dead, not just near death, but I've been revived 7 times. I've had several huge physical targets, psyche targets, that kind of thing. So it's been a long, long road, but that's exactly what I'm in here for, and I'm very honored to be where I'm at right now and making these collaborative efforts with the people at this point in the game.
Yeah, it's and then you add the other layers in the jinns and all kinds of frequencies that they now think they can play with. Sooner or later, the work that's been undertaken on that top end level, whilst it's not being externalized as such, and I keep mentioning about everyone wants to see the external when the internal is far more important, but the external verification of the changes on what we would describe as the higher level or the bigger picture has been nothing short of extraordinary over the last decade. Mm-hmm. And yes, I appreciate people want to see maybe mass arrests or the trust accounts released and all this and that. When you go delve into the real bigger picture of what's gone on here, those things kind of pale. Politics, it's a distraction. But one of the things I want to lead you into the next piece on is you've done all this psychology from within, and that's, to me, is a proper learning curve. I've often said about teachers, they read a book, they don't teach. You teach. That's a different thing. You don't need a book to sit there and then relay that information to other people. And spirituality, and I'd like your opinion on this. Psychology leads into spirituality, and it does merge. It has to merge for eventually to us to go forward. Otherwise, you're stuck with the woo-woo and the New Age book programming. Is that what you feel the merging should take place?
Well, what happened was it was already merged, and then it got separated.
Yeah.
Psyche, the word psychology is based on psyche, which at that point at the beginning was the study of the soul, not of the mind.
Yeah.
And then when some of the players here, the puppets here, figured out how well the cognitive behavioral type things were so effective with control issues, then it took a huge divergence into behavior as opposed to the inner psyche realm. It was more, they were more concentrated on the reaction and the behaviors and how they can control them. So that's where that big divergence went. And my passion with psychology is more that way introspective. I like, things like Carl Jung, a lot of the transcendental stuff, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
That hasn't been popular in the money-making part of mental health, of course, because it is very profitable money-wise. But those are the depths that I studied with that. And you're absolutely right. There is no separation between mind, body, soul, and spirit. We can separate those into container forms just for ease of discussion and definition, and to be able to, speak in those terms of clusters, but really there is no delineation between any of those.
No, it's the boxes again, isn't it? Let's split them up into boxes again. This has been a big problem of divide and conquer. The same patterns play out on all levels. It doesn't matter whether you're talking about spirituality or you're talking about the military or politics or finance. It's the same repeating pattern over and over and over again. Divide and conquer, duality instead of triality, their choice, not your choice. And you have the illusion of free will, when in reality you have none, because you keep giving it away because you don't understand the magic and you don't understand the knowledge. And this is why I do my show, to correct injustice. I'm riddled with injustice on this planet.
Yeah. And with me, that really ties into the depth of what and I don't like using some of these terms because it does sound so grandiose and things, but I did come in with a specific mission to accomplish, as has many others at this point. So I'm not saying that I'm the only one.
No.
But going way back to when I was a very young girl, my grandfather was a huge tyrant. He had my grandmother and my great-grandmother, which was his mother, just totally walloped down. And one thing that my great-grandmother would do with me during times of trying to comfort me, kind of things after the horrendous kind of tortures that we would all go through, is she would share with me the oral traditions. And she had predicted several things that I awaited through life just to confirm that she wasn't just talking, stories and that kind of thing. And that's where she had told me about the repository that I was speaking of. And it seems like what I had come in with, and it's been confirmed now that I'm at the 16th door. I evidently, when I came in, created my own repository, which had several doors in it, which I had to navigate so that certain information, if I didn't make it to the next level per se, that information was not accessible. So there was 16 doors in there, and I have just accomplished the last fire and water purification quest over the last 5 years and got that 16th one opened. So, and a lot of that is in some of my deeper writings and stuff that is getting ready to come out. We don't need to be taking a lot of time to go into detail on that, but that's the depth of what has come in here, and it's just been amazing, some of the people that have contacted me just over the last, say, 4 years, and especially over just these last 6 months, that are amazingly open to this and listening and hearing on such a very, very deep level the messages that some of us have come in with.
Yeah, it's increasing rapidly. And to go back to earlier about, you mentioned about the splitting between the mind and the soul and the spirit. This is plays into integrating the shadow work, does it not?
Oh, yes.
You're pulling everything back in. I call it, we all have different terminology. I call it operating from the heart. And then, you quieten the mind, which can be, as you know, altered and changed into a different thought pattern than what is is you, via all kinds of frequencies and whatnot, and obviously the mind control program is run by MK Ultra and Project Bluebird, which was before that. And yes, Bluebird does have a significant meaning. It's not just the blue avians; it's a whole program. And Project Artichoke was another one that preceded MK Ultra. So this has gone on a lot longer than people realise. And of course, the shadow work, does, and the meditation quietens the mind to be able to then integrate the rest of you. But we've been riddled with dark and trauma. Can you speak a bit about that?
To shadow work itself, one thing I would like to kind of interject here is what I speak of, and I won't speak for you, Tommy, but I kind of have a feeling that you're on the same level as this. This isn't the shadow work that is out there with the pop psych New Age version, which, in my opinion, is kind of a perpetual wheel of keeping people in their victimhood. Yeah. So, the shadow work, now I come at it from two different levels on that. My paranormal background, that was one of the things that I came in with, was very, very open, what people know as veils. I experience things on many levels. I operate on many planes and realms of form and non-form simultaneously. Yeah. So that was part of the stuff when I was going through the shattering part of it that I was having trouble bringing back and putting back into place, because that was part of, they tried to shatter what I had already compartmentalized there. So with everything said on that, the shadow work that I also had done through the psychology end of it, that was linked with Carl Jung's work. He's the one that had coined the phrase in psychology about shadow, the archetype, the a lot of those terms, the collective subconscious, that kind of stuff. And so I do use those techniques quite a bit in my professional part of things, but those boundaries themselves are even kind of blurry. About the only way that I can say that those are different now is when it comes to, my license and the billing part of it. But the techniques, I have to be careful about some of the words I use. Yeah. Because just like in the medical field, you can get in a lot of trouble for saying the wrong words because they've kind of copyrighted words, which is kind of a strange concept.
Yeah, like the word magic and the spells. It all plays in. Like I said before, it's the same thing. It's just on a different level, but the same pattern. Word magic, and it goes on and on. It is extraordinary. Yeah, so,
and that is another level of what I had come in as a skill set with on this too, is many of my incarnations in form had been as a scribe. So I have got a very keen awareness of what is being called word magic, because I have watched this lifetime after lifetime through ages. And that was part of the coming in and calculating just how far this virus that was planted back in Mu, how it had corrupted and infested everything and inverted it to the mess that we're looking at right now. And I tried several times to dismantle it, various ways of success or failure there as well. But that's why I have such a keen sense of words and writing and reading and being able to get in. I'm a huge one on frequency as opposed to just this realm here that, to me, the best way I can explain it is what we're seeing around us is a reflection of the non-form from within, and that. So Anyway, I won't get too deep into that. That's getting a little bit.
You mentioned before shattering, and I got a picture and a memory. I've been telling people about the series Once Upon a Time. There's a lot of hidden history contained in that to do with magic and to do with the different realms and the different planes and how and reincarnation. And one of the things that they block is shattering the mirror. You know, and so perhaps after this show, people have a deeper understanding of why I was mentioning that particular show, because they do give bits of it out, and they just some of it is because it's time to give it out, and some of it is a test to see how far society is getting it, and can they interfere more. Well, they can interfere more, but more and more of their bigger tests are now failing on record levels. Like I said, more to do with the hidden layers rather than the external, right in your face layers, which everyone seems to want. And they go, when's this event happening? Well, it already has. When's disclosure happening? Well, it already has. You're just missing it. Yeah.
Well, that's a lot of the clients online that I work with and stuff, that they'd be the first to attest at how rapidly I get very frustrated at being pulled out into what I've termed the info porn mills. All of that data, all of the details out there of how the structure and the hierarchies work, and how all of this information has really gotten pulled out of context and just scattered. And it is so confusing. I can't even imagine what it must be like for people that are just starting to peek open their eyes with awareness on this, and they start doing the research out there, and, you know, it's overwhelming that I'm thinking of someone that doesn't have any idea how to follow those breadcrumbs.
No.
You know?
This is why some people didn't like it when I said in a show back in November of 2016 it was too late, you know, to help the unawakened. You know, it doesn't mean to say they have to stop, but what I'm saying is it's too late for them to have an easier path. You needed to start really being honest, and this is probably not going to please some of the members. You really needed to start in the late 90s and early 2000s before the internet became completely corrupted, and all documents that were available at the time that had a higher potential of learning and getting into the rabbit hole, as we call it, suddenly all started getting removed, and they were replaced by information that was designed to distract and distort. And the alternative media from 2011 onwards has become a cesspit, you know, and that's the part of the problem. And if people, you probably know better than me, having dealt with clients and such, the biggest problem perhaps you have to overcome when you're speaking to people is the lack of trust of the self. People don't trust themselves, so how can you trust anybody else if you don't trust yourself? Is that something you found?
That is precisely where I start, and my clients get it ad nauseum. You know, through the Primal Path working in Soul Tribe Sanctuary, the things that I work with the people, that is the first thing is that bringing spirit back online, building that trust relationship back with spirit, that spirit source. And that isn't that easy compared to, you know, when you consider how damaged the psyche, the bioform, and the soul container is at this point. Yeah. You know, but that is imperative. You have to operate from your core or your center or your heart. That's what I hear you and Chloe speaking of a lot. Yeah. And I thoroughly agree with that. If you're not operating from your internal compass or GPS, you are out there in a storm with no paddle.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
And this is kind of, perhaps people now understand why I say it's too late to really help the unawakened. They're going to get the full hammer of the truth, and many are not going to be able to handle it. And this is why we've spoken on the shows that it's important of the psychological side. Yes, the intel might be important to some, and the opinions on the news and views and the Q&As, but the most important aspect of THI is the self-empowerment, the shadow sides and the psychological side, because that's how we break out of this system. And sadly, not everyone's going to make it. I don't know whether you came in with the knowledge that the idea was to save the all, but I think it doesn't matter who are your guides anymore. I don't think it's possible to save the all anymore, and we have to save as many people as possible to go forward. It's a sad and awful situation, but we have to preserve the species. And if some are just too dark or too infected, you can't allow them. It's like the bad apple. You have to take harsh decisions. Everyone will fight on for the all, but I think most people realise now too many are too far gone. Is that the way you see things?
Yes, there's a bit, many levels with where others are with that, and it was probably about the mid-'90s when I first got in on this, what has become the conspiracy theory stuff.
Yeah.
And I, you and Chloe both kind of laugh at me being behind the hedge all the time, because that's where I operated from most of the time. I was
safer that way.
I was behind of the now pretty well-known figures out there that were really trying to get this information in. I was kind of the background researcher and ghostwriter for a lot of the Forerunner documentaries that came out and that kind of stuff. And I've had, a lot of very good friends taken out during that. So I've seen firsthand the difficulty from that level. And, there was a point there in it had to have been like 2008 or something when it actually even got to the point that they knocked down my doors and took my computers and filing cabinets too. So, if I would have known then, how I could have adapted, and handled that a little bit differently, that I wouldn't have let that be another one of those things that tried to shut me down to the point.
Yeah, but like everything else, you'll know better than out of those dark lessons and experiences, you can gain far more. Every time, providing you've got that inner strength, not external strength, inner strength, you can still overcome all the hurdles that they throw at you. And they know that. Mm-hmm. They know that the people with the deep inner strength, they can't take out. They can interfere, but they can't take out, because they'll know that they'll just bounce back and come back 10 times stronger. So it's like a totalitarian creep where they're just chipping away and chipping away and chipping away, and hoping, what they're trying to achieve is you to commit suicide. I mentioned this in the last show, where they get your brain scrambled to such a point where you end your own life, so they don't face the karmic of it. And they've done this to millions of people. I've spoken to other program members who were repeatedly drowned before they were 6, and then brought back, and drowned again and brought back. And you mentioned earlier about death experiences. and they use a number of different methods, and that's one of them, repeated drowning. Yeah, you know, these people are also sick, and some people don't like discussing it. I know we did what was called the Svarley show on all hair material, and she was part of the program. She wasn't a victim of it. She was part of the program, and she had the courage to come forward and disseminate the information, and it made people sick. You know, I had to cancel part 2 because people weren't ready for that depth of depravity. And part of the problem is, and you'll know too in psychology, is people struggle to accept that there's people who are completely devoid of morals or any sense, and will go to those depths. And of course you've experienced some of it. And that's, where people apply their own morals. Well, some people are bad, but I can't see them doing this ritual or that ritual or this with children or that with children. Well, just because it's not a case you can't see it, it's a case you won't see it. Because it opens up the inner fears, because, as you'll know, we've all got elements of light and we've all got elements of dark, and it's a matter of your own choice which way you go with it. And it's too easy for the dark to seduce the light, and it takes a lot more effort to walk the light path and to walk the awake path like you have than to just, that's somebody else's problem. Well, we can't all turn around and say it's somebody else's problem.
And to kind of make it even more convoluted and confusing for some people at this point is the light and the dark themselves are not good or bad or good or, evil kind of thing. No. They are very much the components that make up this whole thing here. What has happened is the inversion of both of them.
Yeah.
And presented out here in this, I call it the simulation, which is an umbrella term that incorporates 3 different ways that it presents itself. The deniers, the Wetiko, and then the AI/AC, which is artificial consciousness component of that. But that's where it gets kind of shady, is trying to look at that and see that black and white of itself is not good or bad. It's that inverted quality and the way that it has been presented through the simulation.
Yeah.
So.
I'm
very comfortable with the dark. I do a lot of work in the dark and the shadow aspect, and the beings and stuff that are on those levels as well.
Yeah. So. Because I've interacted many times, including recently. I don't think they're happy with their path either. I think we're coming to a point where many groups, whether it be beings, human or otherwise, are realizing that something's not right here. The animal kingdom, whether it's ETs or whether it's EDs or whether it's different beings from different places that are inside of here. That, many of them are seeing that they've gone a wrong path and it's gone way too far. Even some of the dark jinns. Everyone's been lied to. Everyone thinks they're on the right path. The dark think they're on the right path, and the light think they're on the right path. And ultimately, it's about combining together in a balance, and that applies to there's a big argument or discussion that we have a patriarchal planet, when in essence most of the power positions are matriarchal. And that doesn't mean we have to change from one to the other. What it means is for this time we have to do something different and combine the balance.
Yeah, that is part of, that pendulum has been swinging for thousands and thousands of years, is pitting one against the other. And that's one of those concepts that I speak of quite a bit that I call the primal wounding, which is the wounding of when that spark came up out of the void at the point of the creation of this realm. This has happened many, many times. I'm not trying to isolate it to just here. But at a very early point in that, comparatively, that's a relative term. When you're talking millions of years, it's kind of hard to pinpoint it down. But there was a wounding very early on to that we can identify as we translate it out of those frequency non-form realms and speak of it here, that it's that sacred masculine, sacred feminine shattering, that shredding between those two very, very primal frequencies. And that wounding has since then gone on a kind of a fractile construct of wounding upon wounding upon wounding. And even to this day, each one of us individually are still processing that primal wound within each and every one of us.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like I said, it's the same thing. You mentioned the swing, the pendulum swing. I brought this up in a show probably 8-9 months ago about the metronome, how it swings from one side to the other, and this is another example on many layers again of the same thing of swinging from one side to the other. And you think you either have to be at the extreme right of the metronome or the extreme left, and you've forgotten there's a center, a balance between the two. And this is the same with matriarch and patriarch and every other. You got people in victim mode, and then people swing to savior mode, one to the other. Mm-hmm. It's about coming back to balance.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't.
No, it's okay. No, it's okay.
Just that reminded me, going back to one point that you had asked about, and I'm not sure exactly what it was, but that was where I was. Oh boy, I totally lost it. I'm sorry. I got kind of on a tangent there.
No, that's okay. But yet again, what I'm trying to get across to the members, and you have also, is the patterns repeat on all levels. It's the same on politics. People go, should I vote Democrat, should I vote Republican, or should I vote Republican or Democrat? How about your own choice? And neither. And it's the same with the Matrix. They tell you, or the movie tells you, you should take the red pill. And you've got millions of people going around and says, I'm taking the red pill. Except red pill is LSD. Oops. And so my answer would always be, I'm taking neither. Why do we have to keep this duality choice of male or female? Why not a balance between the two? Left and right brain's another one. Why not combine the two of them and have our own choice? We're not left brain, we're not right brain, we're actually one brain.
Yeah.
And everything on all levels is the same thing. It doesn't matter whether it's politics, finance, it's all about their choice of what we've been given, and we've accepted it, and we have to go, we don't want your choices, we don't want your red pills, we don't want your blue pills, we're taking none of them. Mm-hmm. We're going to go our own path. That's the key.
Mm-hmm.
It's certainly a minefield, but can you talk a bit, if you can, about what it involved before we get into the Soul Tribe Sanctuary, which is part of your group and work, the fire and water purification quest?
Okay. On this bullet list that I sent you, this one was just the last 5 years condensed there. Now, this has been a ongoing, larger cycle, much larger cycle, and it kind of sets in also in what we have known as the Pluto through Capricorn transit that's going on. And what Capricorn represents in this part of it is material realm, the structure, that kind of thing. Not good or bad or anything like that. We're not going to get into all of that. But then the planet Pluto also represents change, cataclysmic change. So as this started going through, we saw revealing up into the point of, I believe it was August where it hit its apex. There was 2 full moons there, and we had the eclipse. And then we've got about 17 more years on the downside of that, which is the dismantling of that material construct. So within that, the fire and water purification, when we talk about the basic elements, fire and water are 2 of the elements that create the largest amount of change and purification. You know, you can imagine fire totally just burning away everything, and then you can imagine water and how it, cleanses. So 5 years I'm speaking of on this purification quest, it started, for me personally, I've compared this, and a lot of people have been on similar trajectories as this, so it's not just me isolated. But at that point, the man I was married to started going through some huge changes, and I had come to the realization that, and I had also at that point made a promise to myself to get back on track and fulfill this quest or journey. But when I made that statement and started off on this, it started at, the divorce happened, okay? And I'll use some examples in this realm just for some people that are more attuned to how it unfolds in the immediate environment. I ended up in a safe house. I was applying for a divorce, and that was one level of the shattering and the purification that happened there. And then I finally got out of the safe house, found my own apartment, moved in, got set up with the lease, and then I was given a 30-day notice at the mental health agency I was working for, because the contract that they got from the state, this is what they told me. I found out since then there was a lot more going on in the background, but that I was told that was not there anymore. So I was given 30 days and the option of a demotion, right? So I refused the demotion, and that night when I went home, I had a phone call from a brand new holistic recovery center up in Cody, which is actually my place of birth. Okay, so I'm going, okay, well, something's blowing me. I'm going to follow my breadcrumbs. I'll see what happens. And I ended up there for a year, and just layer after layer. My understudy was involved in this, which has been totally dismantled as well. Family relationship. I mean, everything. From this point on, it was just a huge snowball effect of shredding and tearing away these layers and layers and layers of the effects of this simulation and virus. I ended up within these the last 3 years of this, I got uprooted from Wyoming and ended up in Colorado, right on top of the subterranean nest between Denver Regional Airport and Cheyenne Mountain.
Yeah.
And the things that happened there was just phenomenal. My first 5 clients there, I can't go into too much detail, but they had escaped from some bases there, and they had been held since they were, teenagers. So that was the extent and the depth and the strength of what was going on. And then things blew up on a family level to the point that just totally ripped apart the rest of the family binds that I had. And I ended up moving everything to Northern California. And that's where I ended up at the base of Mount Shasta. And then I've got several articles out there about how all of this unfolded with, the antivirus coming back into my possession. I know we haven't spoken of that here with this interview. I've got some out there on video and some of my writings. Some may be familiar. We could go into more detail, I guess, later. But we did a fire and water purification ceremony at Pluto's Cave, not far from Mount Shasta, which involved some pretty deep demonic work, dropping that antivirus in. And then that closure after that was the next new moon when the total eclipse happened. By that point, I had been uprooted from even Northern California and landed next to Crater Lake in southern Oregon. There was a period of time of being homeless and on the streets. I was working in an emergency crisis unit for homeless people and actually living on the streets in the tent cities there with my clients. Not because I didn't have a job or money, but because there was no housing. So I learned from those experiences, actually being in the trenches with the people, the clients that I was working with. Then I got uprooted from there and landed back here in the Rockies. So I went all the way from Wyoming to Colorado to California to Oregon and back to Montana now in over 3 years.
Wow.
So that's it in a nutshell.
And you're still fighting.
Oh, yeah.
That's the key to it for listeners who perhaps think, oh, this is always the time. You have to put the effort in. You really want to learn. You can't just turn up and listen to my show every Thursday and think that's the end. This is an ongoing thing, and it's important that you all drive yourself on, like Marilee has, and keep going, because the light at the end of the tunnel will always be more rewarding than how many pieces of paper or bits of metal known as currency you have. All your currency is your life force. And when people find out who and what they are, the idea of giving your life force away for pieces of paper and bits of metal will seem absolutely absurd. And this is what we've been tricked into,
Yeah.
So your grandmother had a vision. Did we cover that? I think we may have done, maybe not.
Well, I started to touch on that a little bit when I went back to the stories that she used to tell me as a little girl during some of those crisis points. But that's where Soul Tribe Sanctuary came from. She had told me that the reason I had come in this time was to meet the hurdle, the bridge that we're in right now. Okay? She told me in very, very detailed stories what was going on. She even predicted the name of one of my grandchildren, and as I went through this, but her main vision, that was why I landed up in Cody, is because when I was under all of that stress, and that seems to be the point, is when you get to a certain point of stress, that is when for some reason you are more open to actually tapping into some of those deeper repositories of your own inner being.
Yeah.
So I got this I went into my computer one day and I just opened it up and this picture came up, and it was exactly the picture that she had burned into my mind as a very young girl when I was 4 or 5 years old. Okay. So I knew I had to go to Cody when that offer with that holistic recovery center came up, So that's what first drew me up there. We had a few gatherings, had people coming from all over the country at that point, and up in Canada, they came for a gathering there in in Wyoming, around Cody, for Soul Tribe Sanctuary, and that's the first time we tried to do that, because Soul Tribe Sanctuary is the third of groups that I have been a founder for. We started with Kindred Spirits, then we went to Ancestral Coalescence, and now this one here. So, but that's what drove me up there, but I didn't know at that time what was actually the underlying drive force of this purification quest at that point. So that's what's kind of, been the motivation, was those visions that she gave me. But what it was in the base core essence of this was to come back to primal and tribal community. And not to the point of communes. Yes, I have. I've lived in communes. I've lived in compounds. I've lived in a lot of different atmospheres, which all of these have led to a very unique and powerful skill set. That's what I'm here to do, is to prepare a torch to pass to the next generation, if that makes any sense. Well, that was her vision, kind of really in a nutshell, is that's what I was meant to do this time. So.
Yeah. She was the messenger. So you mentioned about the primal, and can you give us the core principles and elements of primal pathwork? And then we're probably going to go into a music break. We've been going an hour and a quarter and not had any music.
Yeah, this is we've gotten a little bit deeper real rapidly here than what I had anticipated. So I thank you very much for that. The primal path working is one component of our website that is under the learning portal. We have got a platform there that is rapidly expanding. There's going to be many other ones in there, but the primal path working, I'll leave it limited at that, is a system for people to regain their innate magic, get reacquainted with spirit. It's got many components of it that operate. If you envision, one visual that I use is the Tree of Life, and that one there has got a lot of different meanings to a lot of people. But the one in this component is that breaks upper, mid, and lower into three realms, kind of thing. And then around that, you have a compass picture of north, south, east, and west. And with each one of these points, what we do is we operate through a temporal transition, which is based on the equinoxes and the solstices, and working with earth energy, sky energy, mid energy, and it all coalesces in the heart area. And it's how to operate and use that as your beacon and as your inner compass and GPS to navigate through these areas of transition. So it goes way back, and some people will be familiar with the magic end of this, because that's another one that I have ever since the days of Kindred Spirits. I had 30 students at that time. But it was going way back to the primal basis of magic. And when I talk about magic, this will go more into the word and veered magic that I also speak of, is at certain intervals, the main distortions along this, you can indicate those at some of the changes in our language, in our word structures, and how it reflects out into the culture, and how it has manifested in this mess that we have here. You take the word magic per se, and I always use the K, because the K represents, you add it to magi. Yeah. M-A-G-I is the vessel or the conduit of the alchemical process, the person, the container that has learned how to use that. You add the K to it, that's the primal magic that goes way back before the distortions.
Yeah.
And there was a period in time where C came on there. It became M-A-G-I-C. And that represents the time of, when magic had started to get co-opted, taken away from the so-called common people at that time and off limits. Some of this was tried to be kept through the mystery schools and things like that. That goes into a whole other subject, but that is the representation of magic as an illusion. Yeah. That's where you have magicians come in, okay? Now, none of these are good or bad. I'm not trying to apply anything like that on there, but then even further down the line, we ended up starting to see M-A-G-I-C-K. Yeah. Which a lot of people can attribute that to some of the neo-paganism, the newer witchcrafts like Wicca. Yeah. This really came in. Now, he wasn't totally responsible for this, but the one that was really pushing this at one time was Aleister Crowley. Yeah. And what his vision there was, now I'm not going to say he was good, bad, anything else. We've all had our issues of, interference that we've had to deal with. But what his main idea at that point was to take the powers of both of those and integrate them into this system that was both the magic with a K and a magic with a C. The CK in there. So that's where, kind of that timeline has taken off there. And with Primal Path working, what I try to do is help people to be able to deconstruct from the mess that we're in here and feel back to the time of what was held safe with the Norse traditions, that's called Weird, W-Y-R-D. It's pronounced Weird. Yeah. But see, that's another one of those little letter nuances that I'm talking about, when Y became O. Yeah. Weird is that substrate networking of frequency interaction of form and non-form. It's, the Force, I guess, if you want to talk Star Wars kind of stuff. So the weirding is that frequency exchange communication. So when you take the Y and replace that with O at one very complete point of this switchover, you all of a sudden start seeing the weird, which is the W-Y-R-D, become what has been known as the Word. Yeah. Yeah. So that was where the demiurge frequency interjected in there and totally derailed the whole thing in a major, massive way. So anyway, what we try to do is to learn how to filter through that, get back in touch with spirit, start learning how to communicate on the weirding frequencies, which is not even, telepathy and soul. I started calling it soulepathy, trying to teach people for a couple of decades there, because telepathy had even become corrupted. That's when you started getting all of these hitchhikers coming in on this channeling stuff.
Yep. Oh, yeah.
Yep. So I started moving people to a deeper of the soulepathy is what I was calling it. And then the soul containers started getting targeted terribly. So our last one is this whole spirit weirding. And if you know a little bit about Dune, Isaac Asimov's series that he wrote and had the movies out there, you listen very carefully that the tribal people there have the weirding way, which was the frequency that they incorporated with their weapons in that storyline. But you can see this throughout history and mythologies and all of that. It's very interesting.
Yeah, going back to the K and the C, the CK, and also the word. Of course, we had the recent show, the Ers and the Rus, and the higher evolved beings who were teaching here.
Yes.
And of course, the wizards, as to use the modern term, they were called Vulcans with a K, not a C. And so that backs up what you were saying earlier about the K and then the C. Mm-hmm. And then the C and the K is also a representation of what again came out of the Russian shows about the dark magic mixing with the light magic and then becoming more powerful and corrupted. And that's where the Crowley stuff comes in, the C and the K. Mm-hmm. And then of course the weird, or which then become word, then you're looking into the minute you say the word, most people will say the word of God.
Yes.
And it wriggles right throughout the Bible. Right throughout the Bible and the other books, the word of God. Well, now you know why I warn about religion being corrupted, and it's an external version of the internal version of you, where you give your soul and life force and your magic away to an external entity that's got nothing to do with the real God or source, as I would call it, and everything to do with the demiurge or the dark forces.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And that's why I was so excited about your From Russia with Love, because that is some of the areas that I have researched for a very long time and have been monitoring. Out of the Balkans, that's where, I hate to even talk about bloodlines per se, because that's a very small aspect of it, but if you want to get into that, that's where, I've got the Bohemian, Transylvanian, Balkan stuff that goes along with my Irish Scot stuff, so I was kind of researching and monitoring all of that, and, it's amazing how this is starting to really start popping open.
Yeah, it's converging, everything, on every level at this time. Doesn't matter what you're talking about, that we covered in the show, everything is converging to a point, and it's about to break free. In some aspects it's already broken free, but the bigger and higher aspects is about to explode. I think everyone's feeling that inattention, and things are about to pop on all levels, whether it's politics or finance or religion or criminality, you name it. They're the more, in essence, whilst they're important to many people, they're the lower forms, but on the higher forms, information is now being correlated in a way that people can transcend what they thought they knew into something. Hang on a minute, this is making a lot more sense than what we've been told. And we'll probably get into common sense or uncommon sense after a music break. And common sense is kind of rare.
that has totally hijacked. I agree with you. That's why I use the term uncommon sense now, because I'd rather be uncommon than common.
Yeah, well, it's like it's funny you should use that, because I keep using the term unsanity, because if you're in sanity, you're doing okay. It's unsanity that's the real problem, And yet again, more word magic that they throw you into. Those people are insane, really. Think about the words. You are in, and you are sanity. So you are insane. Now, when you're not sane, as in then it makes more sense. And the more you look at the words or verbs, then you realise what they've been doing.
Yeah.
Right.
Another one to add in there real quick before we sign off here for a music break is the word sane or insane. That's a legal term. That has nothing to do with psychology.
Yeah. Yeah, it's legalese, which is babble, which is no sense.
That's a whole other word magic game.
Yeah. all designed to confuse so nobody gets it. And if lawyers are listening and they think they understand the legal system, you don't. It's not meant to be understood. You know, it's
well, when you have great volumes of a book that defines what human means, that gets a little bit over the top, I think, speaking of the pendulum swing.
Yeah, and we all know their definition, which is not ours.
Mm-hmm.
Right, we're going to go from humans to insects, and the next music piece of your choice is The Fly. We'll be back shortly.
Okay.
Hi all, and welcome back. We've gone past the first hour, and I'm hoping you're gaining a lot of knowledge from this show. We're covering some fairly deep aspects of life, the hidden aspects mainly, and we're going to touch on some more. We've already gone through certain interference, both in the past and the current, and hearts are being reset, and we're going to go forward with this show, despite coming games. Right, where did we finish off? Uncommon sense and practical applications, and this is to do with the primal path working, and then we're going to get into some more of the deeper layers of it. Hi Marilee, are you there?
Yep, I sure am.
Good. So, uncommon sense.
Okay, that is a term there's a category on our forums that we discuss this quite often, is where to bring it back to, the practical application, and what is kind of devoid of the nonsense complications that are rampant out there with the simulations, I guess is the easiest way to put that. We bring it back to what you can actually do here in this realm, and reclaiming your magic, and how the magic on a daily basis is what we align with. When you're doing your dishes, align with the element of water and that cleansing process. Become aware of the elements that are around you, and because magic is not just, we've got high magic, low magic, all of that. We can go into categorization of that, but really when it comes right down to it, reclaiming your spirit and your magic, and how you as a human experiences this process, is how you align with all of these elements and bring it right into your daily life. So.
Yeah, absolutely. In essence, magic is our own technology, isn't it?
Technology is part of it. I see the technology part of it is the tools.
Yeah.
Now, when we work with magical tools and everything, that's where some of this starts getting kind of a slippery slope there. We use the tools, and we use correspondences and things like that, stones, whatever you seem to be aligned with, as just a learning process to be able to focus. Yeah. But you don't want to contain your energy within a stone. You don't want to contain it within a certain figurine or anything like that. When you start running into those areas, that's when you start getting into the areas of dogma, and put, the external things that start leading towards what you were talking about, the religious end of that, where it becomes external instead of what you're actually doing with your own container. Yeah,
absolutely. It's like meditation. First of all, some people struggle, and they need music, and certain beats, whether it's binaural beats or the solfeggio scales. But if you keep developing, you can meditate in an instant by remembering the frequency.
Mm-hmm.
And so you don't need music. Then you don't need the beats and the scales. It's already it's a latent memory of the music of the spheres, as you call it, the harmonic universal resonance. So meditation, you may have to shut your eyes. You can do meditation awake when you develop the self to such a point. And people use crystals and people use orgone and all the other stuff, but it's still an external of the idea is to learn from it and then internalize it. And so then you don't need those crystals and you don't need those stones, because sadly you don't know who has touched those crystals or stones before you and whether they've programmed them. And unless you know that you can unprogram them, you're then stuck with that dark energy. Is that something you've found?
Yes, it sure has, on varying levels, and it has just intensified over the last, I'd say, couple of years. Yeah. It has gotten so wild with, some of these transferences. In the magic realm, one of those is called sympathetic magic, and that is where objects can pick up trace elements of other people, other frequencies, and the way that some of these have been fine-tuned and used as weapons it's just astronomical to watch.
Yeah.
How some of that happens. Yes.
And this is all part of the New Age program, which was started by Blavatsky and took on by the Steiner Waldorf people, and also Crowley. And then obviously there was the whole movement in the 60s of the New Age and the hippie movement, as it was called. And it was all, again, a distortion. The message was okay. It's a bit like religion. There's some messages in religion that's morals that would apply, but the hidden hook is something that people miss until it's too late. And this is part of the problem of delving into programs that they set up for you to trip you up, and you think it's all great, like the term love and light. It's all great. Well, actually, it's not. It's a trap. It's another box, another system of control. And the key is to open, like you did, and I've spoken about this on the shows, about opening the doors. Because once you open those doors, things that you thought you would never know will appear, and you will know what I'm talking about on this. Information comes to you rather than you spending hours or weeks or years researching. It comes to you, but you've got to be in a certain vibratory state, and also match with your own personal evolutionary development to be able to handle that frequency, that information field, and that knowledge. And it's we have to be aware of the hooks, and sadly far too many of us have been duped into so many things, not only in this lifetime but many others, where it appears to be all very nice, and this is a nice easy path and it's going to go this way, and we just sing Kumbaya and love and peace and everything fixes itself. Well, it didn't, did it? And it's far more deeper, and sadly it means a lot more work and a lot more personal trauma, which is what you've gone through, to be able to break through those other layers of the boxes that are even more hidden than the ones we create ourselves.
Yeah, I'm not saying that it is for everybody's path, but what I have in my particular one are those traumas and those pains can actually be transmuted into the catalyst to break through to the healing finally. That's one thing I do as a counselor and through Soul Tribe as well, is to help people to sit in that discomfort long enough to go through it instead of all of the multitude of ways of avoidance, you know.
So we're going to touch on the core wisdom repository and the cauldron of Sile. I know we've touched on it briefly. Would you describe that in more modern terms as like an Akashic record? And if not, how does it differ?
There are some similarities, but there are some major differences along with that. What had happened, the Akashic records were actually a derivative of the core wisdom repositories at one point. But as with the rest of all of these patterns that we've seen over thousands and thousands of years, they got co-opted and sucked in and inverted back. So, there's a lot, and that doesn't mean that there isn't still wisdom to be found in there. It's just, it is a very tricky mess of knot work in there, and it has been very much used against the actual record. So the core wisdom repository, I'm not saying I am the only one that has this or even a very few. Everybody has this written within their frequency signature. Yeah. That's what my role is right now, is to help pass the torch for those after this mitosis separation event. Well, I don't like saying event now even. This process of the purification that is going on between simulation and what I call the primal. That it's, everybody has access to this, and it's not just through bloodlines. Bloodlines are the part that are connected to this realm and plane. When I talk about the frequency lines, this goes all the way back. And as people learn how to filter through and sniff their way through the frequency lines, they have this. It comes up much more readily as you start dissolving those blockages that have been laid down for thousands and thousands of years.
Yeah, in essence, to use computer terms, it's like a defrag, isn't it? You've got pieces everywhere, and you pull it all back together, and suddenly there's a lot more space to fill in, because you have a lot more knowledge and a lot more wisdom.
Yep, and bringing it into shamanic terms, that's what we mean by soul retrieval and the remembering. Because the shamanic journey goes through the fracturing of the person or whatever is going through that shamanic journey. That's the dismembering. And then after the dismemberment happens, then the remembering, bringing back your members, your parts, cleansed and pure is how that happens. So, there's many ways that we can see this in a lot of different constructs and terminology out there, but it's the same process. Throwing away the garbage and bringing in the new. And we all have to do that. That's the natural cycles. Yeah.
We've spoken about the frequencies coming in, and it's been called the wave, and the corrupted wave X that quickly came and went off the internet after it got exposed, because that was the rerouting, as I understood it, to the Saturn Moon Matrix, which Chloe's done documents on. But it's the frequencies coming in. How can your vessel is like a cup. If your cup is already full of oil and trauma and pain and unresolved issues that people like to put to the back, and I don't want to deal with that, how can you fill your cup with better frequencies and better energies and more of the source frequency if you're already, oil and water won't mix. So it just bounces off. And that's why some people are saying they're experiencing the frequencies coming in and the vibration of it, and others are saying they're not, because they've said they've done the shadow work when they haven't. Because otherwise, at this point, you would be feeling the difference on the frequencies and the vibrations, because they are ramping up, particularly in the last month, and within another period of that acceleration, and then it will calm down. It gives people a chance to process and absorb that new energy and new frequency, and then it will go again, and eventually it will have a full-on effect.
Yeah. Well, I know with some of us that work very closely with one another and support one another in these smaller circles, I know a lot of us, I call it the fatigue freight train, because, and that's all we have to say to one another now is, man, I'm in one of those places, I can't think, I can't move, and that is just a natural response to how our bodies and our minds and our souls are responding to these vibrations that are coming through. I remember, I think it was a couple decades ago, they started talking about the, what was that? Was it an ion cloud? What was that? That was.
Yeah, I remember that. It was on the boundaries of the galactic plane. They were talking about, a wave coming in, and it's part of it, but some of that was being, as I understand it, was being rerouted and transmuted to elevate the Saturn and Moon issue, which is...
Yeah, it was like you're getting siphoned into what I call the simulation part of things. Yeah.
Now, as I understand it now, as of 2015, let me think now, 2014, the Moon aspect of it collapsed, and 2015, the Saturn part of it collapsed, as I understand it, so there's not as, that avenue of interference has been eroded and cut off. They've tried others and tried different versions of AI. Was the previous psychotic AI went down, and they're trying all kinds of others. But ultimately, as I keep telling the members who listen to our shows, it's failing every time. Why? Because it's our time. But we can't just sit back and go, well, someone will fix it for us. Everyone has a role to play in this. Some may have more important roles, but doesn't make them more important. Just means they're doing a different role. But everyone, it always comes as one of the questions recently. Is they were talking about certain things to do with the galactic councils and whatnot, and when did I haven't had a vote, but did you put yourself in the position to do so? And people just forget these things. Just sit back and what in relative terms is small numbers compared to the others, that they're going to do everything for them. Well, how can you complain about free will when you're not exercising your own? Why aren't you involved in shadow work? Why aren't you involved in spiritual evolution? Where can you fit into it instead of waiting for others to fix everything for us? That's not going to help either.
Yeah.
If I'll use the old term, if a God came down and fixed everything for us and we just sit back, what have we learned? Nothing.
And how many times has that been repeated, and where has it left us?
Yeah,
you know?
The Savior, I said this at the end of the Russian show, if praying was saved us, it would have given us 4.5 billion religious people, maybe a bit more now. If praying was going to save us, surely all that effort and life force that goes in to the religious people put out would have made a difference. It hasn't. And why? Is because you haven't done your work. And that applies to all people. If you keep giving everything to an external source to fix for you, whether it's a God, whether it's Jesus, whether it's Muhammad, whether it's, heaven forbid, a government to fix things for you, you'll have a long wait. And it's time we fix things. We want better lives and better experiences, and more fair and balanced and more justice, and less dark. That's up to us.
Yeah. Well, another little interesting fun word play on that is to switch A for E with pray.
Yeah.
And that'll give a whole different perspective
Absolutely.
on what is there.
Well, this is how they do things, they just change one letter and you think, the olden times they used to write funny with different letters. It's like spoken about the letter J. It didn't come until the 14th century. So it's not possible to have Jerusalem or Jesus as the name, because it wasn't possible. If they're telling us it's 2,000 years ago and the letter J was 1400s, then something's amiss here. And that's where it all breaks down. And then you've got Maya with the M-A-I-E-R, and Maya. And then you've got M-A-Y-O-R. These are all Rothschild definitions, which then became Bayer and Bauer and then into Rothschild. They just change one letter and think nobody notices because, it's just a different spelling, whatever. And then, of course, you had the changes from English from the UK to American English, and they dropped the U. Mm-hmm. And people think...
And then you add Old English on top of that, and you really have a...
Yeah, and then you put the reptilian language in, Latin, and then it all goes sideways, It's,
At least that one little passage in the Bible was correct on that about confounding our language, right?
Yeah, and the Lord Anu came down and changed all the language.
Mm-hmm.
The scriptures, the scriptures tell you that there is elements of truth, but it's their truth, not ours. That's the problem.
Yeah,
people think
it went through a lot of revisions, that's for sure. By the time it got product. But at the very basics of word magic, and that's one thing I try to teach people or assist them to relearn themselves, I guess is a better way to put it, is all letters are symbols that form words, that form sentences, that hopefully will form a paragraph or a concept.
Yeah.
And that has been so diluted for most people out there. Definitions of a word have become so convoluted, people don't even know what they're saying a lot of times. No. They're on automatic with it. But word magic, when you reclaim it back, when you start being a word crafter and doing your own spell work in that and reclaiming it and incorporating your power into the words that you're using, that's what you do is you find out exactly what you're saying, you take out the distortions, you find out what the definition is, and you put your frequency into that. Yeah. And that gets projected out in communication. And that's where I was talking about the veering part of it, is people that are attuned to the veered part of that communication can understand on a whole different level than just the squiggles that are on a piece of paper or what's coming out of our vocal translation.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember when I started, I started a couple of the times in Cosmic Voice, but then I took it up more. I used to put a few word magic stuff in the shows when I first started THI. And then all of a sudden, it was obviously having an impact, and the Thursday show goes to the top levels. I know that now. I've been shown the proof of it. And then the website I had for the etymology of words, which was fairly extensive, was suddenly taken down. But they obviously knew where I was pulling it from, and they took that website down and replaced it with a very poor version that has no background, and you're not gaining too much out of it. And so that then proved to me that I was on the right path. The things that they take away are the things you really need to pay attention to. The people that they...
when you're into something that makes them sit up and take notice, that's confirmation that I'm on the right path.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I know by when they start interfering at certain points of the show, they're the ones they don't like. So thanks for the lesson, and I'm just going to repeat it. If you want to disrupt it, I'm going to repeat it. and I might repeat it a third time, since you don't like that sort of stuff. The next piece we're going to get onto, I've never heard this one before, so I'm going to be interested to hear about this, is the circle of 8 plus 1.
Okay. That was another part of what my grandmother ingrained in me, was that part of this was at a certain time. Now, I don't want this to be misconstrued as what has become known as prophecy. Please, let's not go down that line on that. These are just certain bits of information that she kind of gave me as breadcrumbs, and the gems within the breadcrumbs to watch for as this all unfolds. And the circle of 8 was to represent 8 frequencies in particular that would be coming together during this time of the final transition. And that's a key point, and I've heard you say it, and I applaud you, Tommy, for saying it, is that the repeats are over. This is it.
Yeah.
And, I've often said this ain't my first rodeo, and that's because we've been at this point over and over and over again. But this one is much different, and I don't know who or what these 8 are, but I can tell you that there has been some indication that these frequencies have found their way into this circle. Okay? It's not my place to appoint those frequencies or people or whatever seems to come in on that. It is up to them to claim their spot. And the plus 1 is, I can tell right now it's been confirmed, is the torchbearer, and that's what I have, is the torch. So that's all that is, and I'm not sure exactly how it's going to play out, because we are in a totally new realm with this level of it, and it's amazing to watch it unfold. So,
yeah, that's. I remember having a discussion with Shane, and he felt things would carry on in a certain way. And I said, they won't change. It's too late, it's game over. And in some aspects he did pull back on that. And we kind of pushed him on, well, have you not seen the changes that didn't take place before? This has happened, that didn't happen last time, Shane. And, it's... people kind of holding on because, like everything else, it's like Stockholm syndrome in many ways. They hold on because it's more comfortable to do so, and they're terrified of taking the leap of faith. Faith is nothing to do with religion, it's to do with enlightenment of knowledge. And if you have enlightenment of knowledge, then if we all had enlightenment of knowledge, then we would have transitioned already, and that's the whole key to everything. And things are. I haven't been here many times, but things are from what I know and my own understanding, a vast difference to what it was at the previous epochs of time that this should have took place. For the simple reason is we're all here. You know, after 2012 or after any period between 1996 and 2012, depending on which particular calendar you want to go on, the fact that we were all still here, or the bulk were, that tells you that's a change, because we all should have been gone. And of course we had the threat of resets, because humanity, as they blamed it, is about to trash the planet again. No, it's not humanity trashing the planet. It's dark interference of people that operate in other realms that we cannot see, and because we can't see, touch or feel, most people think they don't exist, and therein lies the problem. They can't feel it from within. They always want an external, even when they see an external, because they don't have a belief system, or they haven't expanded their consciousness or thinking. They don't believe in it anyway. You know, oh well, it could have been anything in the sky. Well, it's just gone across the sky at Mach 30, and our planes can only go 4. So even when people see, they don't believe. It's like ghosts and spirits. People say, oh, it's just something out the corner of my eye, or they see orbs. No, that was just something in the corner of my eye. No, that's the other realms showing you they exist, and you keep blocking it because you got your boxes closed. So the circle of 8 is kind of interesting. You know, the 8+1, I've been for many years now bugged about the 12+1, because there's so many, I think I'm up to about 14 or 15 aspects of the 12+1. Is the hidden code, and the 7+1. So there's a new one to me, 8+1.
Yeah.
Which is 9, which is completion.
Well, I could probably go into a lot of assumptions and conjectures that I have at this point, but I do not want to speak prematurely on this right now.
Yeah, that's okay. Well, of course,